The Sangamon River begins in McLean County, Illinois. From its start as not much more than a drainage ditch for the fertile farmlands of eastern Illinois, it cuts across the state, gaining size all the way, until its waters form a vast and complex wetland where it flows into the Illinois River at Beardstown. Along the way, this river runs through 215 miles of geographically diverse territory and an equally diverse human population. Join us as we explore how the thoughts and actions of Central Illinoisans reveal their understanding of the Sangamon River, their sense of place, and as we celebrate the river and its people. The Sangamon drops only about 400 feet along its entire 215-mile course. At one point, it drops just 2 inches in a mile. In addition, its many twists and turns create oxbow, or backwater lakes. Edgar Lee Masters, one of Illinois' favorite literary sons, summed up the Sangamon as not navigable, not noted for its commercial activity, not distinguished for majestic scenery, nor for a battle, nor for a single historic event. Masters concluded that the river was distinguished for nothing but for the good and useful lives lived along its shores. The Sangamon River is a people river, whose significance is only truly understood through the eyes and experiences of those people who know it. The last major glacier event, called the Wisconsin, ended 14,000 years ago, leaving behind deposits of sand, gravel, and sediment. Modern human beings have taken advantage of these geological processes by excavating sand and gravel from the floodplain of the river. These natural materials are used for construction of roads and buildings throughout central Illinois. This operation started in 1928 and provides 500,000 tons of sand and gravel each year. Longtime Riverton resident, the late George Rudy, describes another use for the water from the Sangamon River, a use no longer practiced.
Mr. Lumley had it, and he had mine rails put side by side about 12 inches apart on ties running into the water now, mind you. And they cut the ice there with a hand saw like this, and they cut it in blocks, because they wouldn't cut it until Mr. Lumley decided there's at least 11 inches of ice because too much was lost in evaporation. So they would haul that up there. They had a mule on the top with a rope, and they hooked this onto the block of ice and slide it up these rails all the way up to the ice house, where they'd throw it in the ice house, and some guys up there would handle it and move it around where they wanted it.
Another significant use of Sangamon River water is crop irrigation, which enables farmers to support many varieties of crops that thrive in the fertile bottomlands. Similar to any Midwestern river, the Sangamon is made up not only of water flowing above the ground, but also of water under its floodplain. This water is pumped onto fields to increase significantly yields of corn and other crops, Menard County farmer Doug Hollis explains.
We're looking at a new valley irrigation system, which is approximately 2,800 feet long and waters 313 acres. We usually run the irrigation system at a 6/10 of an inch setting, and it takes approximately 50 hours to get over that 313 acres. In my experiences, it has been on field corn, it has been a minimum of 40 bushels to the acre. We've increased it, and at a maximum probably of roughly 100 on a year, which was considered a drought, and we haven't had any rain. Bottom here, I'd say our average yield's probably 150 to 160 bushels the acre. And with this irrigation, we're shooting for, we hope, 200 bushels the acre. We've entered in the national corn contest and stuff like that, and with that, we've come in with numbers of 217 to 230.
The Sangamon River rises from a field near Ellsworth. Illinois poet John Knopfel tells about a turtle he saw at the headwaters of the river.
At the Sangamon Headwaters, culvert has a turtle in it, snapper with a thick neck. They get old. He has a grim smile, like someone who has been around a long time, who admires his enemies and distrusts any friends. He has a tyrannosaur back and a heart for his hide. He is a survivor. It is no wonder he stands for the earth. He is the wise one. He knows which way the river runs.
Long before any formal study of the Sangamon River and its formation, even before the arrival of the first European settlers, the river was used by many Native American groups. Michael Wyant, archaeologist at the Illinois State Museum, tells how prehistoric peoples used the physical resources of the Sangamon River.
When we look at the history of the Sangamon River and the relationship of people, we see an 11,000-year record of people living in this valley. What we see is the use of the river valley in much the same way through time. I think the big difference is that the later people put much greater demand on the river than the earlier people. Let me illustrate with an example. Paleo-Indian people probably moved down to the river to take advantage of its resources, whether it be a white-tailed deer, a mastodon moving along the shoreline. They would live there for a short period and move along to another camp place. Late woodland people or Mississippian people who grow crops and establish sizable communities with greater numbers of people use the river in much the same way for its resources, for its transportation, for perhaps it's the clay that's exposed along the shoreline to make pots part of its technology. But it puts a greater demand on these resources. What we see are people living for a longer period of time along the river, using resources to sustain them over periods of perhaps generations, before perhaps they move along because they've depleted the resources in that area and move to another location along the river, taking advantage not only of the river, but the backwater lakes that form a mosaic in its floodplain, using the forested areas along the river, and then taking advantage of perhaps the high vistas, not only to establish their communities, but also to bury their dead.
He then tells us about how these early people used the river spiritually.
Well, it's noteworthy that the entrance into the underworld is water. And we note that water plays then not only an important role in terms of sustenance and the ability to live and to exchange ideas with communities around, but it is built into the cosmology of these people as a place where they could go to find questions about health and disease, about world order, about maintaining the balance of their lives. And so water then becomes completely intertwined with everyday life, as spiritual life is merged with everyday life. And the process of worldview in these communities was one of maintaining balance.
One of the lasting contributions made by Native Americans to the Sangamon River is its name. The most likely explanation is that it derives from the Michigan word Sanganoi, indicating a river mouth. This word, spoken by natives to early European explorers, was recorded and persisted as Sangamon or Sangamon. Another important resource that a river can provide is transportation, a way of moving people and goods. White settlers began trickling into the Sangamon River Valley in the early 1800s. After they had successfully carved out their new farm lives on both the fertile bottomlands and surrounding prairie, the land they had cleared began to prosper, producing more crops than farmers and their families could eat. The obvious solution was to sell the surplus. Beardstown, on the Illinois River at its confluence with the Sangamon River, was the closest viable river port. One early settler who attempted to make a flatboat trip down the Sangamon was a young man named Abraham Lincoln. Before he rose to prominence as a lawyer, state legislator, and eventually President of the United States, Lincoln was a strapping young man who needed to earn a living like everyone else. Jim Patton, lead interpreter at Lincoln's New Salem State Historic Site, tells about the early days of navigation on the Sangamon River by Abraham Lincoln.
That spring, a young man by the name of Denton Offutt was in the Springfield area. He was an entrepreneur, one of those men who tries to make money as fast as he can, as easily as he can. And he thought he could make a great deal of money by taking a flatboat of hogs and grain down to New Orleans. Well, he needed someone with some experience to pilot that flatboat, and he'd heard about this young Lincoln boy who lived up by Decatur. So he contacted Lincoln and he said, "I'd like to have you take a flatboat down to New Orleans." And so Lincoln agreed to do that, and he said, "Bring some help with you." So Lincoln brought John Hanks and his cousin John Johnson with him. They got to Springfield and they found Denton Offutt there, and they said, "Well, we're ready to go. Where's the flatboat?" And Offutt said, "Well, I don't have a flatboat. The deal's off." And they said, "Well, tell you what, we'll build a flatboat for you." So they went out to Sangamon town where there was a sawmill, and they built a flatboat for Offutt. Got paid $12 a month for building the flatboat. And when they got it all ready to go, why, Offutt got the hogs, barrel pork, live hogs, and grain. They loaded it on the flatboat and they started down the Sangamon River in April of 1831 on the melt-off from that cold winter. The river still was very high. They got down here a couple of days later, about the 19th of April, and James Rutledge and John Cameron had a dam that was going across the river to dam the water to run their sawmill and grist mill here. And the boat got hung up on the dam. The boat came across the dam, rose up on it like that. The back end began to fill with water, and they thought the boat was going to sink. So they had to do something to get this boat over the dam and on down the river. So they decided if they would unload the hogs and the grain, and move and shift some of the load forward, that the water would begin to flow forward in the boat. And they went up, and according to tradition, Lincoln borrowed an auger from Henry Onstott, who's our cooper here, and they used a twist auger. They bored a hole in the bottom of the boat, let the water out, plugged the hole up, floated the boat over the dam, reloaded it, and went on down the river.
Lee Slider, cultural interpreter specialist at Rock Springs Nature Center near Decatur, tells another story of trying to navigate the Sangamon.
In the early 1840s, Decatur was way off the beaten path. And the further you were out on the prairie and away from the major rivers like the Illinois, or good navigable water, and bad roads, you just couldn't get your product to market. If you had corn or you grew any kind of wheat or you had hogs, either you drive those to market, but a lot of these items you couldn't get out. And we were having an economic depression at that time in the 1840s, so cash money was short supply. So some of the local merchants in the Decatur area came up with a scheme to open the Sangamon for better navigation. And the idea was to go and contact all of the farmers alongside the banks all the way down to where the South Fork of the Sangamon comes into and meets with this fork of the Sangamon, and where it was wider and deeper. Now the river is always full of snags and trees toppling over, and it's not very deep. It's only about 4 foot deep, even in the summertime, much deeper when there's floods, but at this particular time, they tried to get these farmers to clear out all the snags and cut back all the trees so they could get some flatboats down the river and load them with grain, maybe lard and salt pork and what have you. So they accomplished this, and they got, in 1842, I believe it was, they got at least 2 boats down. And at Beardstown, and I think one has got as far as New Orleans.
In 1976, to commemorate the American Bicentennial, 5 college students from central Illinois built a replica of a flatboat on the riverbanks near Decatur. Dave Ebert, one of the college students, relates their exploits.
Yeah, a broadhorn flatboat is the barge of the 1800s used in the central waterways in the U.S. It's called a broadhorn because of the two large steering oars that hang out either side that you could control the boat in the current floating downstream. The boat was 36 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 6 feet tall. It wasn't a raft, as some people would think, but it was a boat that floated by displacing water. I spent as much time walking in the river in front of the boat as I did on the boat. I was doing that because the river basically was so shallow. Most people would think of the Sangamon as being kind of a muddy river, but if you walk the river, you'll find out that it's actually quite a bit rocky.
Contemporary users of the Sangamon have found other ways to float down the river, not all of them successful either. Saw and grist mills had a profound impact on the development of villages and towns along the Sangamon River in the early 19th century. One important mill in the history of the Sangamon River was Cameron and Rutledge's mill, built in 1828 at New Salem. Jim Patton tells us how the mill at New Salem worked.
All of the parts of this reconstructed sawmill are not here right now. But to explain how the mill works, there has to be a head of water created above the dam down here, and water would come through a sluice down in the bottom that would operate a paddle wheel down underneath. And that paddle wheel turns turning gears and shafts that operate the up and down saw that's up on top. The other part of the mill here is the grist mill, where the grain was ground. On the top side of the mill up there is a gate that would be cranked up to allow water to come in to a tub mill that works like a turbine. It's a horizontal turbine that works underneath, which turns the main shaft, which turns the wheels up in top that grind the grain.
The Sangamon River is host to 89 species of fish, mussels, and other aquatic life. Sport fishing of all kinds is popular along the river. One of the more unusual ways of catching fish is locally called hogging. Fish are caught by hand from hollow logs on the river bottom.
He's up there. Here we go. Here we go.
That's pretty good one. When I went in, I threw my leg in the log first and pulled my body up to kind of block that out, or block the exit, because when you stick a fish, or when you stick your leg in there, the fish knows where the exit is and he's gonna get out in a hurry. So when I stuck my leg in there, first thing this one did was it bit me, and it tried to come out. It bit my foot, and I pushed it back in where we could work with it. But when I did, he went back in the back part, and I couldn't reach him anymore. So I had these guys trying to push him out from the other way, and then when they did, he came up, and I grabbed him on the lower lip and underneath the gill plate. If you can get him here and here, you pretty much got a good hold on him, and you can get him up tight against your body. Anything else? No. But this is like rough grit sandpaper on here, and they're all facing backwards. So when your hand's in here, I don't know if you can hear that, but it'll really tear your skin up.
Kind of like a file almost.
It is. It'll.
That's why you use gloves.
Yeah.
When it comes to camaraderie, it's just all about the experience that you can have with friends. The Sangamon River gives us a place where on a Wednesday or a Sunday afternoon we can all get together, and even though it is a little bit of work to do what we do, to be able to see Randy or Ty or Justin or Michael or Lefty catch a fish, and to be a part of that experience that not a lot of people have is something pretty special, and I'm really happy to be able to be a part of it and enjoy this this stretch of river that we've grown up on.
This is the fish we've caught over the last 3 or 4 years. The bottom ones are the 30-pounders and above, and the top ones are the 40 and above. The biggest one is 49-pounder right there. Then the other guy will take a rope and run it through the mouth, through the gill, and then tie it. And then so you got a good grip on it so they won't get away. Because once you bring them out of there, they'll fight and carry on, and you might lose them if you didn't have the rope in them. We've caught 20 so far, and they've weighed 546 pounds.
The Sangamon River is also large enough to support several commercial fishermen. Barry and Mary Carter of Riverton have a fishing operation in which Barry and his sons, Clint and Ben, use hook nets to capture flathead and blue catfish, carp, and buffalo.
The biggest fish, we have some that's 30 pounds sometimes, flathead catfish out of the river. Those would be the biggest fish, is the catfish.
I see.
And whole buffalo, sometimes we've had them go 30 pounds too.
Is that right?
And people take them and bake them.
Collecting and sorting the fish and resetting the nets is long, hard work, but it's only the beginning. When the boat is loaded with catfish and buffalo, the Carter men return to the fish market to clean and fillet their catch.
Scoring fish is putting a fillet of buffalo or carp through this machine we have. It has knives on it that go around and a belt. The fish go through it, cuts the bones down to the skin, and then you fry it up and it cooks the bones out.
Mary Carter sells the fish fillets, fried and ready to eat, with lettuce and onion on white bread. Customers can also buy whole fish that are ready to fry, broil, or bake.
We just sell fish to carry out only, that they take it and leave for cooked fish.
Buckhart Tavern near the Sangamon River is an irreverent and delightful gathering place for self-described river rats, a positive term of identification for many people who use and enjoy the Sangamon River. Their memories are wonderful to listen to.
I'm kind of an old river rat like Rich. I've fished it for probably, somewhere between 45 and 50 years. And I didn't do any commercial fishing or anything. It's mainly just pole line fishing. And I can remember back the pollution he talked about. I can't remember the dates, but I remember I graduated in 1953 and got my first car, and then I'd go fishing on the weekends after work. And I can remember driving up on the Roby Bridge down here, and the dead carp on the sandbars was so thick that it looked like the maggots in the fish, looked like the sandbars were crawling and moving. And I can recall, I don't know, it was the same year that happened, that they flushed the river out, for one thing, to get away with the pollution, so it couldn't be found. And we had extensive rains, and the river raised and came out of its bank, and you could walk down there after the river dropped. If you wasn't careful walking along the river banks, you'd have a dead carp drop down your neck that was hung in the trees up 5 and 6, maybe 8 feet off the ground. So you traveled at your own risk for a few days, and 3 or 4 of my friends decided they'd pitch in a little bit, and we'd all go to what they call Cold Springs down here on the river. We'd stay all night. So we took a skillet and skin a knife, and we took some old lard and some paper plates and napkins and stuff, paper towels. And so we sat down there and drank a little beer, and I told the guys I'd go fishing after dark and catch them some fish and fry them up. So they all decided to take a nap, and I went out and I managed to catch a couple of fair-sized carp and some channel cats. So I took them back and I just cleaned them there on the riverbank there on the sandbar, and they'd built a big fire, and I got the skillet out and put some lard in it, and I had some scored carp in there cooking, and I don't remember, the fire shifted or something, and the skillet tilted over and caught on fire, and I grabbed it. Of course, I burnt my hand and pulled it off the fire, and a piece of carp fell out on the sand. And so I let the skillet cool off and got the fire rearranged. So I put the skillet back with the rest of the fish, and I picked that one up with a couple of paper towels, and I brushed it. It was fried on one side, and I brushed it off real good and just put it back in the skillet. So one of the guys, he smelled a fish fry, and he woke up, and so fish was about done, and we took it off and to cool a little. And I remember this one boy, he was chewing away on that fish, chewing away, and you'd hear it crunch once in a while. And I says, well, Wade, I said, how's the carp? He said, oh boy, the fish is good. But he said, that's the toughest damn cornmeal I ever chewed in my life.
In fact, I learned to swim here. We were on a cookout one day, family friends and my parents and my brothers and I, and we'd come down. There's a sandbar up the river a bit, and we pulled in there, and my mom and this other woman were setting up the grill and such, and getting the food ready and things. And we'd just party on the sandbar. And Dad had the boat there, and I asked him if he'd show me how to swim. So the back of the boat he'd put two little handles on there. So we said, okay, you hang on to these handles. I forget how, little kid. I don't remember how old I was. And so you hang on tight. So I did, and he paddled out toward the middle of the river. He says, now, trust me. He says, now, let go. Okay, so I let go, and then he rode away.
Well, we were about, I'm going to say, between 12 and 14 years old. Rich and his brother and I and a couple other friends made us a swimming hole down at the river. It was a private club. Nobody could get in. We had the grapevine up and a rope in a tree to swing across the river and the whole shot. It was probably 8-9 feet deep. We all knew how to swim. There was two of us. The whole gang wasn't there that one day. There was two of us. I don't remember who it was now, but I was one of them. Went down there to go swimming, and the girls and Roby were in there, skinny dipping, and we laid back in the brush there in the weeds and watched them for a while. And then Honoriness took over, and we went and got their clothes and come up a tree and tied them up in a tree and stayed there till they was going to get out. Well, when they started to get out, they found out they didn't have no clothes, so we kept them there till dark. Then we gave up and went home. So it wasn't too much longer, I don't know, a month or so probably. We were down there swimming. The girls caught us. One thing was, they took our clothes home. We had to go home naked.
Third graders at Riverton Elementary School, under the guidance of their teacher, Helen Fisher, develop an equally strong bond with the river by studying and writing poetry about it.
Memories. I love the river, the muddy water on the banks, the breeze from trees, the Sangamon River, that's ours forever. On the prairie, we share our thoughts, we share love, we share river dreams.
The first name for the Sangamon River was Sangamon, and it means good earth or land of plenty in Algonquin. Usually every spring the river floods, and usually it's too deep or too shallow for boats to be boating on. And when they boat, if it's too deep, they can't really see where they're going. If it's too shallow, then their boat will hit the bottom and they can't go anywhere.
Above Springfield, at the bottom of the water, it's all sand and gravel, but below Springfield, it's all mud. The Sangamon River used to end in the Illinois, but a man-made channel will now no longer allow it to. It now seeps into a wetland area. It's changed the way I think, because I used to just think of the river as a river. I didn't really think much about it. Now when I think of the river, I think about all the animals and all the plants that live there.
High school students from Ursuline Academy in Springfield study the chemistry and biology of the Sangamon River to determine changes in water quality. Their teacher, David Abendroth, explains the research his students are conducting.
This particular sampling station, we are sampling for what we call benthic macroinvertebrates, and they are, sounds complicated, they're simple organisms, live on the bottom of the stream. They feed on dead organic matter, and they have no backbone. They're large enough to see, so that's why the big name. What that tells us is each of these organisms is tolerant to certain amounts of contamination pollutant, and by determining what's here, we can see whether or not Sangamon River is actually polluted. They are catching them by two methods, with a kick net and also dip nets, and then they're identifying them and recording the total number that we catch. And then we get back to the classroom, the lab, we're going to push them through some biological indices, the numbers, and come out with the water quality.
Juliana Lima, a sophomore at the school, gives her impression of the Sangamon.
So we're out here in the river trying to, find ways to preserve it. We're doing testings on like oxygen, see how much life there is in the river right now. We came earlier in the year in the fall, and so we're going to do like a compare, contrast sort of thing to see if it's getting better, if it's getting worse.
Doug Carney of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources is optimistic about the future of the river.
The Sangamon River is I would say a typical Midwestern stream. It's been subject to some excessive sedimentation and some pollution in this area. It has, I think, improved significantly, I would say, over the past 25 years or so with the advent of better sewage treatment plants and essentially clean water activities that have cleaned up the water quality.
Back at the Buckhart Tavern, Rich Stogda recalls the Sangamon River's greatest flood.
Well, probably the highest flood that we ever had on this river here was in 1943. And that was when it took all the main houses and barns up and down the river from Mount Auburn down this way. But has never been that high that I can remember.
Riverton native Margaret Kick recalls the same flood.
In 1943, it rained so much that our rivers really came up. And in order to keep our bridges, the Wabash Bridge here and the Urban Bridge, which is down about 6 blocks or so, they would put loaded coal cars on there to keep the bridges from washing out.
And Dolph Guy, railroad engineer, discusses the impact of the 1993 flood on the railroad.
From crossing the Sangamon River over about 24 years now, I've seen it at all different stages of flood and also low stages. And the Sangamon River can go from a docile river like it is today to a real treacherous river at high water levels. In 1993, when the Mississippi got so high, the Sangamon River was at its highest level that I've ever seen it. And here in the background you can see our trestle just north of Springfield here, and the water is normally 15, 17 feet below the bridge. In 93, the water got up to above the concrete supports on the bridge and almost was touching the steel at the bottom of the bridge.
Tragedies occur when people are careless on the river. It's just the situation for which the Menard County Rescue Squad is prepared. Ken Yoakum of the Rescue Squad relates several of his experiences at the Petersburg Dam.
We start out as a rescue and hoping that we can retrieve them before they become a recovery situation. What I mean is when we get the call that somebody is in the river, our main goal is to try to get to that person before they do drown. So hopefully it is a rescue situation, and like I say, most of the time it turns into a recovery situation.
Kay Watt and her dog Hawthorne help recover bodies from the river.
This is my dog Hawthorne, who is a 6-year-old golden retriever. And we've worked with Springfield Underwater Search and Rescue Team for 6 years, and we do water search primarily. And I'm here to help Kenny. Anytime Kenny calls for Menard County, if he has a recovery situation, he needs a water search cadaver dog to come and help him pin down where a body might be located. What happens when someone drowns, there's still a scent source, and that scent will come to the top of the river. And if the conditions are right, some of the scent will evaporate into the air, and so the wind and air currents will pick it up. Now he's an air center, so he picks up the smell of cadaver on the wind and air currents, and his body language will tell me where the scent is, and then I have to map out where the scent is, and it could be extensive on a river like this.
Life is not all work for Hawthorne, however. Sometimes he just enjoys himself.
Well, there ain't no mud in heaven. We got it all in Illinois. Well, there ain't no mud in heaven. It's all run down to Illinois.
Frank Beeler and Mark Emmerling of the Springfield Underwater Search and Rescue Team tell us how they help find objects on the bottom of the river.
Springfield Underwater Search and Rescue Team was founded back in 1960, and the purpose then, as it is now, is just to kind of do community service work and in the water, just to help the community out in any way we can, to put our diving skills to use to help the community. CSAR's been called upon a lot of times through the years to look for evidence and different crimes, and also oftentimes there's drownings. And the CSAR has been called a lot of times to look for drowning victims.
The Sangamon River diving is probably the most dangerous diving that I've ever done and probably ever will do. There is no visibility whatsoever. You never know what you're going to find underneath there. The current is very unpredictable. It's a test of teamwork primarily. The members of the Springfield Underwater Search and Rescue Team are almost like a surrogate family. We're doing something that we think is very important for the community, that we've been given these skills that we can use to provide this type of service, and we develop a bond that we literally trust our lives to these people.
Kathy Cruz, veteran police officer with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, promotes the safe enjoyment of the river and its fish and wildlife.
Oh, there's a number of ways they enjoy it. I see a lot of just everyday boaters that are out there, a lot of fishermen just fishing from their boats, campers. I come across campers quite often. We've got people that like to canoe or just like to go and pick a spot out on the bank just to throw in a line and fish from the bank. Of course, we've got the legal commercial fishermen that are actually going out and harvesting the resource to sell in the fish markets. You know, there's a number of legal activities that go on all the time. A lot of hunting during the hunting season. You know, the river is basically especially in Sangamon County, one of the few areas that's got a lot of timber and a lot of wildlife left along it. Most of the rest of it's all farmed, and you just don't find the populations like you do along the river here. The river contains pretty much whatever you'd want. If you like catfish, you're going to find some really nice catfish on the river. We have the walleye, we have bass, we have white bass. You're going to find occasionally I'll find a guy that's gotten lucky and gotten into a pocket of nice crappie. You know, you're going to find just about almost any species. I've got one guy especially that fishes every year. I check him at Riverside Park, and he catches alligator gars every year. And he swears they're the best eating fish, says they taste just like chicken. Believe it or not, I get a lot of, I know about the spoonbill, but I get a lot of guys calling me every year that they're catching spoonbill. Everything has to drink, everything has to use the river. So at one time or another, I've probably seen just about everything you can see. One of the things that I'm real happy to see, which I haven't seen when I first came on 20 years ago, is the turkey. And that's because we're restocking turkey, and it's nothing nicer to go down the river and look over and hear some gobbling and see a couple big turkeys strutting through the timber, you know. So yeah, you're basically going to, any wildlife you want to see that's native to Illinois, you're probably going to see it on the river.
Most people who use the Sangamon River are proud of it and want to keep it as clean and natural as possible. Marge Evans organizes periodic cleanups along the river below the dam at Decatur.
Today there's a group coming here to help clean up the banks of the Sangamon River. This has traditionally been a place where trash has been dumped. And we're trying to change the habits of the population so that we can turn it into a very clean and beautiful area that they could be proud of.
She is ably assisted by a large group of volunteers, including Joe Haverly, biology instructor at Richland Community College in Decatur.
Well, in our collection we have found, we find furniture. This is a lot of furniture. Ordinarily we find many more tires, a lot of glass, a lot of fishing tackle sort of things. We find those styrofoam containers, tires, glass, beverage bottles, beer and whiskey thrown along the banks of the river.
Steve John is another river cleanup volunteer.
We've been doing these cleanups for a number of years now, and actually now we actually pull out a little less stuff than we did in the early years. I remember the first year we did this, we kind of joked that we pulled out enough stuff to manufacture a car and to furnish a small apartment.
The dam at Decatur backs up the Sangamon River to form the only artificial lake on the river. Keith Alexander, Director of Water Management, discusses the history, purpose, and use of Lake Decatur.
Well, because the city of Decatur bought a lot of property when the lake was formed in the 20s, we have kind of 2 or 3 different types of waterways here in this part of the Sangamon River. We have the lake itself, which is 3,000 acres of lake, what people would traditionally think of as lake. And we also have about a 600-acre area of water, which is kind of the transition zone between the lake and the Sangamon River, where it is wide and flat like a lake, but extremely shallow and has a lot of stumps there. Kind of a transition zone between Sangamon River and Lake Decatur. Then as you go farther upstream from that location, once again you return into an area that is traditionally known as the Sangamon River. Still a very pleasant place to canoe or boat through and fish as well. In the early 20s when the lake was built, it was built primarily for water supply, for industry, for A.E. Staley Inc. in particular. But even when you look through those notes back then, they recognized the recreational importance of the lake. And throughout the years, as power boating has developed from basically a rich man's sport to something that everybody can afford to do, we've certainly seen an increase in boating on the lake. As the city grew, so did the housing around Lake Decatur. We have now literally 400 or 500 docks along the lake where folks use it for boating access. We have folks use the lake year-round. For example, we have folks that ice fish and ice sail in the winter. We get fishing when the ice melts, obviously. We get power boating and sailboating of all forms. We have fishing tournaments on the lake.
Nowhere is river rat culture more embedded than in a place known as the Sanganoi Conservation Area at the confluence of the Sangamon River with the Illinois River at Beardstown. The Sanganoi is renowned for its hunting and fishing. The 10,000 acres of state-owned wetlands form a complex system of lakes, sloughs, and swales that wind around and rejoin again, giving a look of chaos to the first-time visitor. The Sanganoi provides refuge for a culture of river people. There are families who, for generations, have subsisted on the fish, wildlife, and timber resources of the Sanganoi. Pete Ham has been hunting and fishing in the Sanganoi for more than 65 years and comes from a family that is legendary in the area. He talks about the wildlife in the Sanganoi.
Beaver, that's a beaver house there. This is what you call ash swale up in through here.
And how do people trap beaver back here?
No, they trap them once in a while. They don't trap them too much. They hardly ain't been worth nothing here lately. You know.
I see. Do people do other kind of trapping here besides beaver?
Yeah, they catch some muskrat and stuff. If there's any price on them, but most of the time the fur ain't worth nothing anymore.
What about mink? Any mink back here?
There's a few mink, yeah, but they ain't hardly worth catching anymore.
I see.
Nothing is. But this year there's a better price than they have been for 5 years.
He also discusses why most of the trees in the Sanganoi Conservation Area have died.
In here, these trees all died. They get sold them for millions of dollars, and then you get this, what do they call it, these bird watchers. They didn't want them to cut the trees, you know, so.
What killed the trees?
This high water killed the trees, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just too much silt, and they couldn't breathe too much water around the roots, and they just killed them all. It's the first time anybody's seen it for Well, since I've ever been around, my dad too, you know, he's dead and gone. He never seen anything like that, I know. Well, these trees that killed had to be, what, 150 years old probably. Yeah. So it had to be.
What were the trees? What kind were they?
Oh, there's pecans, willers, maple, cottonwood, you know, just regular old bottom trees. Now the bur oak, they survived a little bit. They, you know, they're a tougher tree, I guess, you know. And pin oak, they survived, you know, a little bit. And, but you can see up here, just everything everything you see is dead.
And sometimes people get lost in the Sanganoi.
Oh yeah, I had a brother get lost up in there for 2 days. 2 brothers of mine. They was coon hunting, and they come in from the other side over there on. Oh, there's been a lot of people. And when mushroom time there years ago, before they built these roads and stuff in there, them mushroom hunters, there'd be somebody lost all the time. There'd be airplanes flying looking for them all the time. Hell yeah.
I've seen duck hunters lost.
Yeah, a lot of duck hunters got lost. Yeah. Well, there was 2 of them got lost right up here one time. They ended up in Chandlerville. They kept on going that way, and pretty soon they hit the bank. They just got out and hitchhiked and went to Chandlerville and got drunk.
Duck hunter Gordon Smedley appreciates the Sanganoi.
I'm real happy that they have it. Because, you know, everything else is private anymore. Unless you've got money, you don't hunt ducks, except on a place like this. And if you've got money and can buy your own lake or your own club, and you can hunt. But this gives us poor people a place to hunt.
How do you get to hunt the blinds?
Well, you go. They have a drawing over in the Sanganoi's bottoms over to what do they call a check station, and you go there and sign up. You've got to sign up. Maybe 6 hours before drawing time or something. Start in before 6 hours, and then they draw your name out. There'll be 1,000 guys there.
How does that work? You get it blind, and then what?
Well,
how long do you get the blind?
You get the blind, then you can put. You get it for the year, and then you can put two guys on it. You can have 2 friends on that blind. If they draw your name, you can add 2 guys to it, 2 friends to it.
Beardstown lawyer, the late Jack Andrus, elegantly describes the remoteness of the Sanganoi.
You know, people ask me why I come up here and mess with this. There's 2 reasons. First of all, you never hear a telephone up here. You can't. Secondly, no UPS man can find you. No FedEx guy can ever find you. And basically, the cops can't find you. When I come up here, I have to tell somebody that I'm going to swamp, because if I could disappear literally and nobody'd know where I was and they wouldn't be able to find me. The guys I hunt with, and they'd know where to go look, but you get back in here, you get lost, and you're in a world of trouble.
He then explains the relationship of the Sangamon River to the Sanganoi Conservation Area.
All of that, the whole gamut was created, built, made by the Sangamon, not the Illinois, Sangamon. The Illinois might take a little credit for some of those big lakes out on the river ridge, but all the rest of this is Sangamon. This whole thing is the Sangamon. All these sloughs are the Sangamon. All that water back there comes from the Sangamon area. It comes out of the Sangamon drainage. Water runs in Decatur. That Salt Creek makes up part of the Sangamon. It all comes out through here. The Sangamon is a tough enough river. When she's up and ugly and mad, she'll shut the Illinois down. And it can raise a whole bunch of feet real quick. You got to watch it. Sangamon's a lot more dangerous river than the Illinois if it's in flood. Illinois scares me more if you got ice floating down it, because it's bigger and deeper. But as far as just being tough and running fast and doing what moving water does to land, the Sangamon River is the architect of all this. And nobody will ever tell me different.
Several river users and river lovers tell us how they feel about the river.
I guess the river, to me, as someone who's very interested in science, it's important because it's an important part of the ecosystem which makes this area of central Illinois very unique. We have not only the prairie lands and all the farmland, but we also have a river that runs through it, and I guess in an ecological or biological sort of way, to me it makes this area seem a little bit more diverse, a better, more well-rounded place to live.
You show me a river person and I'll show you a good person.
We know that the river has improved dramatically, and we can primarily applaud the decision of the city of Decatur to really put in a state-of-the-art water treatment plant, and that was about in the mid-'80s, and that dramatically increased the quality of the river, of the water quality, and we're now seeing game fish in this river, and that really pleases us. It's a river that you can go down and really feel that you're getting as near as you can in Illinois, central Illinois, something of a wilderness experience.
The river for me, in a way, is a remaining hope. It's a little isolated island of wild land left. In Illinois, the rivers are always the little corridors that where the wild things are left. And to me, there's a hope there that people will learn to appreciate those little wild spots and take that concern and do something with their concern. That's one of the hopes I have, and it's important that it's a little indicator of what land is left, and it's a little bit of sympathy that people have left for wild things.
I think, could I have a wish? I would wish that every child could have a playground as big and open and as exciting as this.
My first actual experience at Sangamon River was with my kids. I took my son out on the Sangamon River probably when he was about 4 or 5 years old. And he had the best of time, and so did I. And I think that was one thing that suddenly made me realize what a treasure we have in the Sangamon. I think without water there's no life, and whether the water is flowing or not, maybe flowing water makes it a little more exciting, but without it there's no life, and I think we have to have it.
Well, the Sangamon River is more of a gentle, it's a sort of she's a gentle entity, and she's sort of like she's a little bit like the Midwest, you know. She's down to home, she takes her time. There's nothing really fancy about her necessarily, but she has her own presence and sort of a solidity or flow to her. So I guess she's a little bit like the Midwest, a standard kind of gal, but you wouldn't want to do without her.
Edgar Lee Masters wrote, "The genius that defines man and spots of earth and chooses them for memory has laid its hand upon the Sangamon River."
Come with me on a trip, on a memory ship, to a place on a wonderful stream, where the birds in the trees the Sangamon, dreamy old stream. There's where my thoughts are tonight in my dreams, where the birds sing of a sweet memory, by the old spring in the shade of a tree. I hear the sound of the wheel at the mill, I hear the echo rebound from the hill. There where the sun